Attention all you New Yorkers. Taxi! Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
And I'm Jake Novak filling in for Steve Moore today. Great to be with you on this beautiful Saturday, at least here in the New York area and the Northeast in general. I hope you're having great weather where you are. It's still a little chilly though. So I will not be one of the people going to the Mets game this early evening. Early season baseball is torturesome to me, in person at least. I usually try not to go until May. I can handle brutal cold in a football game any day of the week, any time of year. But cold baseball games, unless you're at the World Series, just doesn't seem worth it to me. But that's just me. Hey, in the first half hour, I got more than just macroeconomic on you guys. I almost went biblical with my big picture, major big picture from 50, 60, a million, 1,000 feet, whatever you want to talk about it, however you want to say it, in my talking about the economy and economic realities. You have these major events going on internationally, nationally, and locally, and they all affect our economy because the economy, just like the climate, as you've been taught since, if you're a younger person right now, millennial or younger, I know you've been taught since nursery school that the climate is a living thing, but some of us who are older, Gen Xers like me, had the Mother Nature stuff drilled into our heads from preschool on. Just like nature, just like the climate, the economy is a living thing. This is not an exaggeration on my part, nor is it an anthropomorphication. I didn't pronounce that right. But the idea of making something that isn't living into something that is living. I'm not doing that. It is living. It is a living thing. I'm not saying it's a sentient being. I'm not saying that we bow down to the god of money or economy. But as we've been talking about the breaking news today of several U.S. naval ships traveling safely through the Strait of Hormuz despite Iranian threats against them, that will affect our economy, most notably in oil prices when we get trading again tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Then you had the Eric Swalwell case, our nation's biggest individual economy as far as an individual state of California. I believe these revelations now about Eric Swalwell, very coordinated with a lot of donor money behind this coordinated effort. And again, I have no idea whether these sexual allegations are true or not. I am not denigrating or questioning the victims or the alleged victims in any way, nor am I really denigrating Eric Swalwell in any way. Not at this point, not on these issues. I'll do that on the other things that I do know about for sure. But I do know also for sure that these were coordinated, financially backed efforts. This took law firms. This took PR firms. This took media contacts, probably a little payola, to get this done so fantastically, so splendidly, so very well done in the way that it was done in a coordinated effort. And they immediately got Pelosi and they immediately got Adam Schiff to rescind their endorsements for this guy, Eric Swalwell, for governor, and on down the line. Folks, the Democrats are doing this in the hopes of getting Swalwell to drop out, and they think that this will boost some other Democrat, maybe Katie Porter, who's another member of Congress among the Democrats running for governor. Not sure who they're expecting to get the biggest boost from Swalwell dropping out of the race. I actually think that won't work. I think they've actually hurt their entire brand, and I think we are a step closer to a real businessman in Steve Hilton actually becoming the governor of California. A real big-time businessman, not just a pro-business Republican like we've had in the past in some governorships in California, not recent past, because we've had a lot of governors in a row now, or at least two-termers in a row, 16 years since Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor. But he was pro-business at least most of the time. But we've never really had a big CEO type, business owner type, employer of a lot of people type, real estate. We've never had that. And California, I think, is a step closer to that now, and that is the nation's biggest individual by state economy. It still is. Texas and Florida, again, making a big play for that. But that's a big economic story. And then finally, there's a lot of horrific crimes in America. I'm just doing the one that's getting the biggest coverage right now. I know I'm being a little geographically biased being a New Yorker, but this stabbing at Grand Central Station, 3 elderly people stabbed with a machete, the cop shooting to death, the stabbing, the machete wielding maniac. Just seeing now that the 3 victims looking like they're in stable condition, that can be not so good either, but at least they're not, it looks like they might make it. Thank goodness. But that's an economic story too, because crime causes poverty. You show me the impoverished nation in the world, the impoverished neighborhood, the impoverished city, and I will tell you the crime that created that poverty. It could be a war in some ways, and many times wars are crimes. It could be just an absolute militia or armed group or mafia group that came in and ruined a town. I'll tell you what it is. It could be drugs. Look at Mexico. Mexico isn't crime ridden because they were poor. Mexico has tremendous natural resources. They're crime ridden because the drug cartels have created a generational poverty problem in that country. And a few other things too. And there are other criminals as well. And colonial criminals of the past as well. Not the United States, but from Spain. And you know who else was. Germany for a while was also running Mexico, if you can believe it. Anyway, folks, that's the big picture stuff. But I want to get into the nitty gritty because I'm not a huge fan of economic reports, government economic reports, and not for the reasons that you might think. You might think, here's another guy, Jake Novak, who's going to have a conspiracy theory about partisan fooling around with economic reports. No, that's not me. I don't really have too much evidence of that. It wouldn't shock me. But I don't really have that much evidence of that. What I do have evidence of the fact is that economies are really difficult to measure. It's kind of like trying to figure out how many gallons of water you have in a swimming pool by putting a ruler in there. It's not going to really give you an idea. It's hard to measure an economy. It is a living thing. And like all living things, there's a lot of metrics, biometrics you need to take before you get an idea of how things go. But as economic reports go, I am kind of a fan, I'm accepting, of our consumer price index. Why? Because the consumer price index is determined. This is what we call the consumer inflation report, or most of us just call it the inflation report. Because it is determined what is known as a basket of goods. They literally take the average prices from as many parts of the country as they can get for a number of items that people commonly buy. And this latest inflation report that we got yesterday, I thought was fascinating because, first of all, I have almost never seen, because I don't think we did, first of all, I was only about 9 or 10 years old when we had the real gas shock of the late 70s. I was born in 1970, so I didn't go through economic reports as a 9 or 10-year-old. I wasn't that much of a nerd. I did like to go out and play and on my bike and play baseball and football and stuff like that, believe it or not. I was very aware of the inflation. I was very aware of gas prices. I paid attention to that a lot, but I never actually sifted through the CPI as a 9 or 10-year-old. Well, I do it now. And I can't ever remember a CPI report that was so dominated by gasoline prices in my life. Because gasoline prices, while they have gone up, the issue here isn't how much they've gone up to, because we're still well below the record national average for a gallon of regular gasoline. As of today, according to AAA, that number is $4.13. That's the national average right now. Now, that stinks compared to where we were the day before the war, which was at $2.98 for a national average. So we're up $1.15 in less than 2 months. That stinks. I get it. I hate it too. But $4.13 is still 88 cents below the all-time high set during the summer of 2022 under the Joe Biden administration. There wasn't any war in Iran going on at that time. It was even before the October 7th attacks, by the way. When we hit $5.01, 501, that was the national average. That's the all-time high. Now, I like to play around with inflation calculators. There's a couple you can get where you can take a look at something and say, hey, what $1 in 1888, how many dollars would that be today? How much buying power would that get me now? An 1888 $1, and you find out it's like $100, you know, that kind of thing. And then you can also go backwards. So it turns out that $4.13 today is like paying $3.66 in 2022. And $5.01 in 2022 would be like paying $5.66 or something like that now. So we're way below the all-time high in real numbers and also inflation-adjusted numbers. And in the CPI report, we found that gasoline, now the CPI the Consumer Price Index showed a 0.9% increase in inflation for March. That's a big jump for 1 month, okay? But it was almost entirely fueled, no pun intended, by gasoline prices that went up 18.9% in 1 month. That's a big spike. That was almost all of that increase in inflation. Because listen to some of these other numbers. This is fascinating. Used cars and trucks, and that's a big part of our economy in this country. Maybe you never bought a used car, or maybe you did. Maybe you never had a used truck. But you understand, especially used trucks are a big part of the business economy in this country. Plumbers, contractors, people who need to haul stuff, buy a lot of used trucks. All right. Used cars and trucks fell last month by 3.2%. Those prices fell. Not sales, prices fell by 3.2%. That's fascinating to me. Now for the things that everyone's been talking about during this inflation spike since it started under Biden and people tried to continue this narrative under President Trump. Meat, poultry, and eggs. Can you guess where they went last month? If you guessed up, you're wrong. They went down 0.9%. Egg prices in some parts of this country are at all-time lows adjusted for inflation. Down. Dairy prices down 1.6%. That's a big drop too. Does this mean the economy is great? Does this mean everything is great? No, not on those numbers alone, but it gives you an idea of where we are in inflation, with inflation. Gasoline prices are all really giving us all the momentum right now in inflation. That's what's going on. It's gasoline prices, my friends. And if they do come down, and by the way, they are coming down. We were at $4.16 a couple of days ago. I'd love to see it continue to come down, get back down under $4 for our national average. That will help our economy. And meanwhile, even with this very big spike in gasoline prices, we've seen used cars and trucks fall last month, 3.2%. The price of used cars and trucks, big deal right there, by the way. And that has a lot to do with, by the way, EVs. Used EVs are a bargain right now. I'm not a huge fan of EVs, but I do concede that there are a number of parts of this country where getting an EV makes financial sense. Getting a used EV at some of these bargain prices makes even bigger financial sense. And we're seeing these food prices go down. At least they went down in March. That's a nice development, folks. And one that we shouldn't ignore, and why it's worth getting into the nitty-gritty. Now, again, I don't vouch as much for some of the other economic reports. I am a huge critic and skeptic when it comes to the jobs report every month. I think it's an incredibly insane attempt to measure jobs in this country, to have people basically self-report their payrolls. It's just crazy. It's just crazy to me. That's a huge part of it. And sometimes they fudge it. And I've met people who admit that they fudge it because they just don't have time. So I'm not a huge fan of that. And I know the markets move on all these economic reports, and they don't move on them because everyone on Wall Street thinks that they are accurate. They move on them because they're betting on it like a roulette table. They don't necessarily believe the numbers mean anything. They just have a bet in on the number, one way or the other. And they have every right to do that. Go for it. Have a good time with that. But as economic reports go, the CPI is pretty interesting because it's as close to accurate as I can think of any kind of economic report. I really like it. And to me, this was not a scary economic report to me. Gasoline prices, we know they're going to go back down. They always do when supply gets freed up. And that's where we are. All right. I'm Jake Novak in for Stephen Moore. We're going to talk a little bit more coming up next about betting markets. Speaking of people who bet on numbers, big news on that front. We'll be right back.